when you think about an electric vehicle, I mean, people would not be surprised that the battery is the most expensive part of the car. Well, the second highest cost of the car are the semiconductors. Yeah. There's so many semiconductors in an electric vehicle. It's actually the second highest cost category in a car.
Thanks so much for joining the business line.
My pleasure.
Awesome. So Dan, share a little bit about yourself. Let us know kind of, not necessarily straight from the womb, but how you got started, how you got into this industry that we're in these days when it comes to, parts and technology around electric vehicles and power.
Sure. Well, I'm an engineer by training, but my whole career I've always worked in bringing new energy technologies to the marketplace. I spent some time, in the gas turbine business at General Electric. At one point in time, I was one of the associate directors at one of the Department of Energy's national labs that was overseeing the R&D for all kinds of new energy technologies. So I've always been fascinated by how much energy is a part of our life and things we do every day, and just ways we can actually use energy more cleanly and more efficiently so that we actually can hopefully leave the world a little better place than we found it.
Cool. So when you were young, let's say pre-college years and, your kind of formative high school stuff, were you tinkering? Were you, messing around stuff with school and building things and designing things? Or
I always taking stuff apart, see how it works and put it back together and just kind of trying to understand why something worked the way it does. What are the things that are really important in terms of something that comes out that's new? I'm sure I drove my dad crazy with times when I put something back together and it worked just fine and there was a part left over. And I said, whatever this is, it can come out of the cost of this product. So
yeah, because it's still working without it. Why? It's like every time I build something, there's these extra screws. Like, did they just give me extra, or do I need to go back to some instructions here?
Exactly.
Yeah, me and my brother were the same way. We'd get a new toy, and you'd be playing with it for a little while. Well, eventually you're curious, and you take it apart and lay it out and try to figure out how to get it back together.
Yeah,
hopefully it works again the same way. And then, so where are you originally from, Dan?
I'm originally from Pennsylvania.
Okay, so out east. So grew up out east, Pennsylvania. So you ended up, where did you go to? You went to school.
I went to Pitt.
Down here. You went to Pitt. So you stayed right there.
Yep.
And so you got done. What was your first job out of college?
My first job was working as a field application engineer in an air pollution control company.
All right. So tell me a little bit about that. What was that like?
It was interesting. It's a chance to really get to see a whole lot of different industries, see the problems that they're facing in terms of, how do they make themselves cleaner? What are the technologies that are out there that are available to them? And kind of what drives their decision making in terms of what technologies they adopt and why that's a good solution for them and not. And good chance to really interact with people who are really using products every day to understand it from their perspective. Since typically, as an application engineer, when you're out in the field working with the field service guys, you're troubleshooting some issue, you're really understanding what's the customer's pain points, whereas if you're just an engineer designing stuff, you don't necessarily have that appreciation.
Right, absolutely. So how did you transition from that to your next stepping stone?
I actually went to work for a contractor for the Department of Energy, where I was doing some support for some of the advanced energy technologies the Department of Energy was working on. And then the Department of Energy hired me directly from the contractor. They just wanted me to come on board and actually start to run some of the programs. And like I say, eventually became associate director at one of the Department of Energy's national labs that was responsible for a whole bunch of new energy technologies they were sponsoring and doing R&D on.
So take us back, like in a time machine. What's the time period when you were going through all these kind of different stepping stones in your career? Where are we at? We 80s, 90s? Where are we?
We're 80s going into the 90s. Yeah.
Okay, so late 80s, early 90s. So I was young then, wasn't quite in the workforce, but I mean, I was kind of aware of kind of certain things were happening. I remember if we're going to be talking about energy and efficiency, one of the biggest things, I didn't even plan to talk about this, but this is actually going to be funny. You're probably going to remember this if you had kids at the time, or maybe you're a little bit kind of getting into that. But the big push in school was to teach us youngins about, recycling and the environment and taking care of things. And, when I was really young, I was born and raised in Texas and lived in Texas for a long time. The big push back then in the 80s was don't mess with Texas and littering and stuff. And then I can remember like cartoons like Captain Planet and all these kind of things was really kind of building at a core level with that generation, the importance of, how we're doing things and what we're consuming and how we're using power and those kind of things. I mean, what do you remember about those times with our, society and kind of the things that we were working through at the time? And you were like, you're in the power industry at that time.
Yeah, a lot of it was focused on how do we clean up the quality of the air and the quality of the water, because when industry was going through all the growth after World War II in the 50s and the 60s, it was all about, just grow as fast as you can.
Scale, right?
Just scale up. And then people started to see the cumulative effect of all that. And then really you started to see a focus on, hey, wait a minute, we've got clean water issues now. We've got issues that are affecting people's health because of air quality. I grew up in the Pittsburgh area, and you think about Pittsburgh back in the 50s and 60s. I mean, you couldn't safely breathe the air. People would go out at lunchtime and have to come back and change their shirt because it was dirty.
Wow. Yeah, it was a real transitional period when it comes to the kind of the worldview and the way we saw the things we did and the way we saw and lived in the world around us when it came to, being clean and stuff. So what were some of the big struggles back then that you remember trying to, having to overcome, kind of working through in the industry?
Well, a lot of it was companies that come through all this growth, they were focused on growing their business, growing the bottom line, and having to spend money in response to environmental regulations was viewed kind of as a tax on the business. It's like, well, why do I have to do this? It's going to enhance my ability to be competitive with other companies around the world that I'm trying to compete against. Everybody could see the impact. I mean, you saw it every day in terms of just water quality and air quality, but still it took a change in the business mindset. And that's kind of what I saw as I was going through high school, was a lot of these companies really pushing back, saying, we'll do it because we have to, but not because we think it's the right thing to do.
Right. Absolutely. For you personally, your career growing through this industry, what have been the biggest obstacles and hurdles for you to overcome?
Well, part of it is when you come out with a new technology, you've got to figure out, will it work? Will it do what you expect it to do? And then you've got to get people to just be aware of it, to understand it. So the technology adoption cycle is never as fast as you would like. And sometimes, especially like in a small company, it can be frustrating because you really want these big companies that can benefit from the technology you've got to adopt it and start to incorporate it into their products. And that cycle doesn't go as fast as you would think. It takes quite a bit to educate the engineers and product designers and get them to be comfortable. And if they're in big companies, there's a kind of a risk-off mentality you have to get over. No one wants to try and do something new that nobody's done before. So sometimes that I've come across that like multiple times, where you got to be patient, you got to feed them the data, you got to be comfortable with the technology, so that they and eventually become your advocate for the technology, internal to their company.
And I've noticed in some of the info you guys gave us to kind of prepare for this show today, you've had some success, coming into companies. And, obviously we all know as leaders that it's not always because of us. We just hope to not get in the way of the people we put in the place to do an awesome job. What are some of your thoughts on the keys to some of that success?
A lot of it, especially when you're trying to introduce technology to big companies that you want to partner with, is you got to find the right people. Who are the right people in the organization, not just at the technical level, but at the business level, who are looking for ways to differentiate their products, to eliminate some of the pain points they may have, or to enable them to grow their business and capture new customers. So you got to really spend the time to figure out who's paying attention to the particular space that you're in and who's looking to learn more. And then you got to be willing to actually, be responsive to them, make sure they get the data they're looking for, make sure if there's something that is unique for their application, that you're spending the time to give them answers that are, not just hand waving, but you've gone into the lab to do some work if you need to, or you really spent the time to understand their application so that the answer you're giving them is really on point.
What would you say for you has been the maybe a couple of the biggest catalysts from making a transition from being, at the, let's say at the operational or let's say middle level in a company, and then making that transition to being a CEO? Because I think a lot of people may think they want to be that because there might be the glamour in the title of CEO, but it's not always what it's cut out to be. What do you think? I mean, what has been your experience that have been kind of the key catalysts to doing that?
It really comes down to finding the right people, because you need people that have the expertise you need, but you also need to have a team that can work together and can leverage each other in terms of their experience base and their knowledge base. So that people side of it is really important. And it's one that really only comes from a little bit of trial and error, where you think about when you're interviewing people, they're always on their best behavior. They tend to claim probably more credit than they probably should for certain accomplishments they might have on their resume. And you got to really kind of sort through what have they really done and how are they going to fit with the other people they're going to have to work with day to day, particularly if you're in a scenario where you got to be problem solving and you need a bunch of people to go work together and not just defer to somebody else because they have the strongest personality in the room.
So what I think I'm hearing you saying is you got to be a good team builder. You got to understand people's personalities and to some degree figure out what those are and understand how they're going to work with each other.
Exactly. It's key.
Right. Yeah, yep. People skills is one of those things. I won't go off on a diatribe, but I talk to folks in our company and peers a lot about that. It's not if you're trying to get somewhere without having strong people skills, you're going to hit some walls and some roadblocks that are going to be really hard to get by.
For sure.
Awesome. Well, cool. Thanks for sharing so much about yourself. I'm sure I'll dig in a little bit as we're learning more about the company and a few things later on. But so talk to us about what you're doing right now. Talk to us about your current project.
Sure. Well, Ideal Power is bringing a new power semiconductor device to the marketplace. And whether you realize it or not, our society today completely depends on power semiconductors. They are what controls how the motor in your refrigerator operates or your air conditioner. If you have solar in your home or your business, they're essential to taking the energy from the solar panel and turning it into alternating current so you could use it in your home. If you have an electric vehicle, you got a lot of power semiconductors you're using every day. And what they do is they really take energy in whatever state it's presented and transform it into whatever you need, whether it's a certain voltage or a certain amount of current, and they control the flow of it as well. We've come up with a really novel technology that enables a lot of applications that are out there to actually use energy more efficiently. So if you have solar, that means more useful kilowatt hours for your home or business. If you have an electric vehicle, our technology helps those electric vehicles get more range out of the batteries that are on them. It's really all about using energy more efficiently.
Well, that's got to be important because I've talked about it a little bit over the last few months. I mean, for years I remember the first time I drove a Tesla just for the fun of it because I wanted to experience what it was like. I was like, this is really cool. But the sticking point every time is that range, is the efficiency of the battery. I live in a cold climate most of the year. How's that performance going to go down? I know how my phone acts. It drives me nuts when my phone battery is dead. Yep. And then I have to wait, right? So if you can, in layman's terms, for myself as a simpleton, I think I have a pretty smart audience, but how exactly, without giving away any of the the KFC secrets, how are you accomplishing those better results?
Yeah, when you take energy from the battery or you send energy to it to charge it, that's power semiconductors that are controlling how that process operates. And power semiconductors are not 100% efficient. They can't convert energy from direct current, for example, from the battery to alternating current 100% efficiently. There's loss associated with that because it takes energy to make a semiconductor work. What we've come up with is a new type of semiconductor design that actually has less loss associated with it. So, for example, if you have a bi-directional power semiconductor switch for charging and discharging a battery, with the conventional technology, it takes a certain amount of energy for that process to work. We can do it with about 5 times less loss. So it's meaningful in terms of the amount of energy, and it's inherent in the way our semiconductor technology operates. It's all about getting those semiconductors to provide as much useful energy as possible.
So let's put this to boots on the ground. So I'm a person that's looking to buy an EV, but I haven't made that decision to pull the trigger on one because I'm concerned about the range.
Yep.
So let's say that car company decides to start using your semiconductor. What should the expected results be by moving to using your guys' technology?
Yeah, based on some work that Toyota had done, and we've actually taken that and sort of leveraged it for some of our work here. If they were to use our power semiconductors instead of the conventional approach that's been out there, they'd get about 7 to 10% more range, which is pretty meaningful. Improving the range of a vehicle is pretty challenging. There's a lot that goes into it, and you don't have a lot of knobs to turn. I mean, you can reduce the weight, you can make the batteries, more efficient, which is very difficult to do, or you can improve the semiconductors that control the flow of energy through the car.
Okay. All right. Well, if I could go if I was looking at a range of, 300 and adding 10%, let's say 10% and another 30 miles, that's not insignificant.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
So, and again, this is a newer design and technology that you guys are bringing to market. I mean, is it fair to assume that with time and resources and effort, that even the technology you guys have come up with can be improved?
Oh, absolutely. We're actually already working on our next generation design. All technology continues to improve over time as you gain experience with it, as you learn more about the theoretical limitations of things, if you learn how to make things. So our technology will continue to improve over many years. And we've got a technology roadmap of what we're going to be working on for certainly the next 3 or 4 years, all designed to just keep improving that efficiency number and also driving the cost down at the same time.
Yeah. What do you think about, the current market's acceptance of electric vehicles? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it looks very much like the typical new technology adoption curve. If you think, for example, when flat panel TVs first came out, they cost like $10,000, and the picture was pretty marginal, to be honest with you. You think about where they are now, spectacular picture, and you can buy a huge screen for, $400 or $500.
Right.
EVs are going through that same kind of technology adoption curve where you get people that are really excited about a new technology. They buy it for the thrill of having something new and the unique aspects it may have, like rapid acceleration. But to get to that mass market, you got to deal with the two main issues, and that is cost and performance. EVs cost more than conventional vehicles, and the performance issue is range anxiety, because it's going to take years to get the charging infrastructure built out. So I think as the EV makers really focus on how do they improve range and how do they bring the cost down, you'll start to see a much broader adoption just across all the user space that's out there.
Yeah, I tend to agree with your assessment there too. So what role do you think, let's say, governments should be playing in this? I mean, I have my opinion on that. I'm more of a kind of let the market, dictate what's going to happen. But what do you feel from a governmental approach? How involved do you think they should be?
Yeah, personally, my view is when the government's here to help you, it's going to cost more, take longer, and get more complicated than it needs to be.
Amen.
But I think we've already reached the tipping point for EVs in the longer term, and you've got some companies like Volkswagen and others that have already said publicly, we are at some point, and some of them defined what year that is, we're going to stop making combustion vehicles. We're going to switch to EVs. So I think the line of sight for mass adoption has been drawn. I think it will happen more slowly than people think just because of the cost and performance issue. But I think in the long run, regardless of what government does, it'll get there because we're seeing the threats of new entrants. I mean, you look at some of the Chinese automakers that have very low priced vehicles, $10,000, $12,000 compared to, what we're seeing in the US market. They're putting price pressure on Tesla and others that are forcing them to reduce the cost of the vehicles, to innovate, to find ways to drive cost out. When you're in the sort of the lone position in terms of the provider, your customer base isn't really as cost sensitive, but to get to that broad market, you're going to see a big push on it. And it's part of why you see some of these large automakers like Stellantis that are working with us. They're looking for how do they reduce the cost and improve the range at the same time. And technologies like ours play a role in that.
Yeah, and that's what I think that's what we need, for that government, push to say, okay, everything has to stop doing this, you have to do this for that time. That's I think that's a recipe for disaster. I liked your assessment of when they get involved. It's typically not a good sign, and you're not going to do things under budget or on time either. But from that standpoint of, when the technology is ready, like your assessment of televisions, obviously, when it gets good enough and inexpensive enough to where it can be implemented on such a broad range, the adoption is going to increase. Now, you can't get CRT TVs anymore. Why would you?
Yeah, exactly.
But I don't know. Maybe they did, but it's not nearly as high profile. Maybe companies like Sharp and Toshiba and Sony and all these, LG and Samsung, maybe they did say, by this date, we're going to stop making CRT TVs and it's going to be all this. But I guarantee, and you as a CEO know, they were probably looking at the data. Data is showing constant adoption rates increasing. At some point, it's just not going to be necessary to make those.
That's right. That's exactly right.
But I know some companies are struggling recently. A few days back, there was a video, and I didn't get a chance to watch it. I saw the headline, but when I realized that we are going to get a chance to talk to you today, I brought it up to Matt. Matt, do you have that short interview that the former Chrysler exec did on Fox Business? Have you seen this, Dan?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Okay, cool, Matt. Thanks. He's got this queued up. We don't have to watch the whole thing, but let's just listen to his comments here, and I want to get your thoughts on it.
So I want to bring in now a terrific guest, former Chrysler CEO Bob Nardelli. Bob, so wonderful to have you here. Of course, you were CEO of Chrysler from 2007 to 2009. Which, if I'm not mistaken, was right in the middle of the financial crisis. So you have a lot of interesting experience in the motor industry. But with regard to electric vehicles, it still feels to me that the general driving public does not want to be forced into driving an electric vehicle. What say you?
Yeah. Well, actually, you're exactly correct. My timing was not too impeccable back then with Chrysler. But let's reflect for a moment. Back during that period, Obama and Biden issued the CAFE standards, where they were exactly trying to do what Biden's doing now. They basically said the average mileage for an internal combustion engine had to increase significantly, therefore limiting the number of Ram trucks I could produce. So we had to produce smaller cars. The consumer said, no thanks, and they had to find an off-ramp then. Now let's look at something. The installed base today is 278 million cars. When I was at Chrysler, the average age was 11 years. It's now grown to 12.6 years. Consumers still saying, I'll make the decision on what I want to buy. Administration, yet another debacle with EVs. You're not going to force me to do that. We just heard from Kelly about how Tesla really missed the number in the first quarter, but BYD missed it even further. They were only at 301,000. If you look at Rivian, you look at Panu, Fisher, Lucas, Ashley, these people, Rivian lost, 5.4 billion last year. So they're having one heck of a time. These startups are just not going to make it. And one more point, you experienced this on your trip. Yes. There's 64,000 EV charging stations compared to 196,000 gasoline stations. There's 1.8 million charging stations in China. It's a phenomenon. Now, when you went to a gasoline station, did the pump work? Sure. When you went to charge, as I recall on your trip, you had a lot of problems trying to get that vehicle charged to get back to New York City, my friend. So this is just another, another issue, another debacle by this administration trying to create a revolution versus allowing an evolution, as we heard from your last presenter. This will happen, but you can't force it down consumers' throats.
That's exactly right.
What are your thoughts, Dan?
Well, first of all, I know Bob Nardelli. I used to work for him when I worked at General Electric.
Oh, nice.
I think he's right on point. I mean, the reality of it is, when you try and force these solutions, especially when you're dealing with something that is really high cost for most of the target consumer base out there, you really force them into a decision where they say, well, I'm just not going to buy. I'm just going to hang on to my vehicle. And candidly, the auto industry has that problem already. If you look at the inventory levels in the auto industry, even just conventional vehicles, it's back to pre-pandemic levels and growing. Yeah. And the rate of buying has been slowing down because the interest rates are making it really prohibitive, because during that pandemic, automakers raised prices.
Oh,
So
like
now you've got a
crazy.
more expensive car with very high financing rates, and the prices have not come back down yet. So I think the industry as a whole has got some big challenges ahead of it that they're going to have to work through for both conventional and electric vehicles.
Yeah, I agree. And he made some of the points that we're talking about there. He's talking about kind of charging stations efficiency, and like when they were showing some of the kind of the numbers, Stellantis showed up there, and you mentioned you guys are working with those guys when it comes to partnering.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you look at the situation on the EV charging. Not only do you need to have a lot more of them, but you need to be able to charge more quickly, because when you go fill up your car, you don't have to sit there for 20 or 30 minutes. You can fill it up with gasoline, in 5 minutes and you're gone. So you actually ultimately end up needing more charging stations because you're at a charging station
There's more lag.
longer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and the charging stations that are out there, depending on, what source you looked at, I've seen some numbers where at some points in time, there were as many as 20% of them that were not functioning.
Yep.
So there's a lot of work that really needs to be done there. And that's also going to pace the adoption, because that's going to directly reflect people's comfort level of how quickly and how conveniently can they charge their vehicle.
And, we might not be able to get to it. It might not be the right lane, but I think you'll have a lot more input on this than I would. How about the infrastructure on the grid to support it? Right? Because that's one of the biggest things that I realize. And, we don't necessarily have a lot of power issues where I live here in the Midwest. The small town I have in has their own kind of coal plant, and they've got some alternative kind of coal things that they burn in order to give us power. But we've also got a nuclear plant, north of us. And, people buy energy from our town and we're exporting it. So but there's large metro areas out west and southwest that, they're trying to get on, solar and wind power grids, and they're struggling. There's brownouts and they're not even, fully electric yet. These cars, like I remember when I heard about the F-150 Lightning EV, I mean, when it's fully charged, if you get a certain version of it, you can run the power in your house for a week.
Sure.
Now, I think of the reverse effect of that. What does it take to get that sucker to 100%? What if there's 150,000 of those in a small area? So what are your thoughts on that? Supporting that?
When you think about the total amount of energy that goes into the transportation sector for fuel, you can't get that energy from our existing utility infrastructure. It wasn't built to provide that much, for one thing.
Yeah.
And whenever you put these charging stations in, and then you're putting in intermittent sources like solar that are connecting to the grid, they also all need protection, because if there's a fault that shows up in any one of them, you got to be able to isolate them from the grid. And, we're dealing with a grid that, the average transformer is over 35 years old. So it's not just that it wasn't designed for it, it's old in its own right, just to serve the existing needs that are out there. So the demands on the utility system are going to require an enormous investment to actually accommodate all this, because it's really changing the way we use and distribute energy. And that's going to be a decades-long process for all this stuff to come together.
Yeah, because one of the things I was just thinking about as you're explaining this is I never really put this thought into it is 20, 30 years ago, you're talking late 80s and early 90s where you were getting into this. I'm a young kid and not everything is electronic yet. Right. There's still a lot of, power things on, elbow grease things that we're doing. I remember messing with my dad's, drill. That was the power. The drill was, arm powered, and, I was putting holes in his toolbox. But now, and then things started to become more and more electronic, and they weren't very efficient. TVs weren't very efficient, microwaves, everything. And then and that had to have put some stress on the grid. Well, the grid is the same as it was back then. Things are more efficient. There's, exponentially more things that are plugged into the wall. But now we're talking, high level energy uses. Yeah. When you compare it to, the energy that is needed to propel cars and trucks and everything around right now. And that's all, fossil fueled.
It's all fossil fuel. And if you think about it, there's a lot of things going on the policy side in various states and even at the federal level designed to actually increase the electrification. You think about there's pushes to get rid of gas stoves and have them all be electric. If you think of California, there's a pushes for things like all lawnmowers to be electric rather than, gas engines. So the demand is going to just keep going up as we get increasingly electrified, and which just puts so much emphasis on we've got to be able to use the energy we have as efficiently as we can. And we've got to figure out how are we going to make sure that we have a distribution system that can actually accommodate the way we're making and using energy today.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a huge point in what you guys are doing with semiconductors to make the usage of that, the conversion of that electric power into useful energy as opposed to just stored energy, more efficient. That's going to be huge, and it's going to be something that is going to be absolutely necessary to allow technology to evolve at a pace that we need it to in order to support what we're doing. Because because we still got to generate all that power somehow. Right. Yep. And if we're going to
generate it, you've got to get it to where it needs to be. So you think about as dependent as we are now on our smartphones and streaming services for your TV, you need more and more very large data centers that are enormous consumers of power.
Yes.
That are also going to go into this grid infrastructure. You've got all these distributed uses as people start to actually do distributed computing in their businesses. I mean, it's going to be a long-term fundamental change for a system that was originally designed for big central power plants with a hub and spoke design to distribute it out to where it's needed.
One last thing I wanted to pick your brain on here before we move on to some fun stuff is, one of the mistakes I think we make is, and it's definitely a great motivator, but I think one of the things, and I think it polarizes people's thoughts and opinions and where they fall and the importance of this stuff is this whole need to get to alternative energy sources is marketed out of, playing on people's fears, right?
Yep.
Fear is an intense motivator. But what it does is it polarizes people, because a lot of people are going to be like, I'm not scared. A lot of people are going to be, I'm super scared. Why are you, and so people start kind of fighting as opposed to focusing on what's important. How do you think we could better, market and communicate to everybody, because we're all in this sort of thing together.
Yeah.
The importance of don't freak out. Don't treat your neighbor because they like their pickup truck like he's dumb and doesn't care. And on the other side, hey, don't be so apathetic not to understand that it's important to moving forward to do things in different ways.
Yeah, but that's a tough one because it reflects just the increasing polarization that we've got in society where, to some degree, and I see it, I think, more with people of a younger generation than me that have lost the willingness to actually listen to the other side. I've got folks that work here that are much younger than me, and I learn things from them every day. You have to be willing to listen, and nobody's got all the answers. And if you're not willing to listen to someone else's opinion and actually have a respectful discussion about it, it's hard to make those situations better. And it becomes very easy to just get polarized and you dismiss somebody because they don't share your worldview of something. At the end of the day, we're all going to be successful or fail together. There's no alternative approach. And that process is going to take doing things a little differently. And it starts with, the leadership. We've been increasingly just polarizing everybody from a political standpoint. And that just creates trickle down with things we see every day.
Yeah, I agree. I think you hit on it right there. It comes down to that when we're making decisions on how to move the needle the direction we want, and whoever it is that has more power to move that needle at the time further in one direction, you do it. If you do it in those ways, using fear and kind of demeaning the opponent, then it's eventually going to propagate to something that's very hard to control. And like this brush fire that's just going to hopefully not get out of control.
Yeah. Well, and I think you also have to think about, how is somebody else perceiving your message? I'll give you an example that always kind of rubs me the wrong way. When I hear Al Gore talking about how we absolutely have to act and do some things that are in his, potentially kind of draconian.
Yeah.
And he's flown in on his private jet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
to tell you this. It's like, well, it's kind of a mixed message.
You just
there,
use
Alan.
more carbon in the last 2 hours than I probably will the rest of my life.
Exactly.
Right.
So, you create a credibility issue for yourself when you're saying, well, you need to do this, but it really doesn't apply to me because I'm more important,
Yep. And it's funny because, my circle of friends, there's the folks that are really in, to the power revolution. There's those that are kind of just want to live like they did back in the 60s, with their old car with no computer chips and stuff in it too. But I don't have anybody that really isn't interested, and when I travel around and I meet people, face to face, I don't experience any of the polarization that we've been talking about, right? Face to face, I just experience people that have their preference, but still like other things. Like I drive a truck, but I'm still fascinated with technology. I still love to have something that's on the bleeding cutting edge. You know what I mean? But, and I've got friends that have a Tesla Model C, but still love to ride around in my truck because it's a different feeling, a different experience, so.
Well, I mean, Brian, I'm in the energy and, efficiency space, and I drive a truck, it's basically suits the way, I live my life and the things I do.
I got to haul things around. I got to help people move.
Exactly.
My daughter's got to jump in and pretend it's a stage every once in a while. Like it's useful in a bunch of different ways, but at the same time, I'd love to have something where if I was doing specific types of travel to and from the office every day, where maybe I wasn't paying $70 to fill up my tank. Yeah. But at the same time, energy's not cheap right now either.
Yeah. Well, that's also part of the issue is that, in the US, we have been kind of spoiled because we've had historically very cheap energy for all our lives. And, now, with what's going on just politically, the global supply issues and everything else, we're starting to see a little bit of the pain that others have had to deal with. I think to some degree is, well, wait a minute, gas used to be $1.50 a gallon and, now it's $4. Who's responsible?
Well, I tell folks all the time that it's like, hey, honestly, gas hasn't gotten more expensive. Your money is worth less. That's what's happening there. So, when it comes to what are some things we could be doing when it comes to power generation that would be a lot smarter? Do you think, from an engineer's background?
It's to me, at the end of the day, electricity is a commodity. Okay. And, we need to understand that if you're going to drive the price of electricity, there's only three things that really drive that. It's the first cost to build the source of generation. It's how efficient is it, and what's it cost to maintain it. Those three things go into the calculation for the cost of electricity. So, it really becomes about how do we improve efficiency and how do we drive down the cost of what we're using to generate? And for the operating and maintenance side of this, how do you use fuels that are inexpensive? It's always a balance of those three things because generally what happens if you try and improve one, it adversely impacts the other. And it's really us just kind of moving beyond the days where you put in a coal-fired power plant that's 30% efficient and you'd run it for 40 years and then go build another one. It's really all about how do we take advantage of the state-of-the-art technologies that are out there, because there's just been enormous investment in energy generation technology, the improvements in gas turbines, the improvements in the efficiency of solar power conversion, the ability to start to couple energy storage with solar and wind to make it a reliable source rather than intermittent. It's really getting more creative about how we're actually making that energy in the first place and then just transmitting it and using it more efficiently.
What are your thoughts on nuclear power generation?
The problem with nuclear is it's a cost issue. It's when nuclear power plants were first starting to be built, the story was, it'll be too cheap to meter. Well, if you look at the last nuclear power plant that they tried to build, it was 10 times more expensive than a gas-fired combined cycle. So nuclear has got to get to the point where it actually has an economic chance to actually do something and still satisfy all the requirements that people would have in terms of safety and regulatory issues. So I think, I don't see a lot of nuclear plants being built, certainly in the U.S. for quite some time because it's just going to result in power that's too expensive. But it should be part of our portfolio. I mean, it's a great baseload source, no emissions. We have to make sure we've got a solution for, the waste material. But that's been something the government's been working on for decades.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Well, this has been good. So let's roll into a little bit about, some of the things you like to do when you're not running a company and when you're not on the bleeding edge of semiconductor technology and making sure we're converting power efficiently. What do you like to do in your spare time? What brings you joy, Dan?
I play a lot of tennis. You need a physical outlet for sure, because, you work long hours and long days. So it's good to be able to get out and do something where you can just hit a ball.
Yeah.
And feel like you're getting some stress out. I do a lot of stuff outside. I really enjoy just being outside, hiking and fishing and all the things you do when you have a truck,
Yeah. Do you still live out east? Are you still in Pennsylvania?
I'm in Austin, Texas.
You're in Austin.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I've got family. I was born in Houston, kind of grew up in Beaumont and familiar with Austin and that area and stuff. And we've got some clients in San Antonio, but might be down there in a couple months visiting. So.
Well, it's as you know, I mean, it's all about the outdoors here.
For sure.
So it's how do you take advantage of the fact that you've just got, beautiful hill country, lots of great places to go and hike and just enjoy the outdoors and do things outside. I mean, when I first came here,
you have some land that you can get out on every day and just kind of awesome.
I mean, I live out in the country, so there's plenty of opportunities around me. And when I first came here, I was used to playing tennis in the Northeast, where all the courts were pretty much indoors except for whatever's at your local high school. And here, try and find an indoor court; they're all outside. So
yeah, absolutely. So how long have you been playing tennis?
Oh gosh, a long time. I wish I was better considering how long I've been playing, but I've played a long time. Yeah.
So are you ever going to convert to pickleball?
Yeah, that's a question my wife keeps bringing up, and I keep pushing back. It's like, maybe when I'm 80, I don't know.
It's a fascinating sport because like 10 years ago or more, actually more than that now, I used to be a marketing and community development for a YMCA. And it was kind of like pickleball was starting to pick up some steam. And it was, some of the seniors that were members that were there every day, they'd set up pickleball courts and the basketball court and stuff. And there was a whole tennis facility at this Y that was functioning and thriving, and they were training kids and they had, tournaments. My kiddos and my wife and stuff go back to the Y these days, and I don't think they even have a tennis program anymore. It's all pickleball.
Yeah.
It's all pickleball training. The kids are playing, and I know the senior communities are playing. I'm like, my in-laws used to have a place in Arizona, and their community had tennis courts, but tennis was never played. It was all pickleball.
Well, here in the Austin area, in a place called Dripping Springs, they just this last year or so had like the U.S. Pickleball Championships. I mean, I didn't realize it had gotten so big, and they had this huge turnout with just I don't know how many courts, 10, 12 courts that people were out there going through a tournament.
Yeah, it's there's definitely a lot of skill involved in it to get really, really good at it, like putting spin on the ball and doing wacky stuff. But it's not as I don't think it's not nearly as difficult of a sport as tennis, because I tried playing tennis when I was younger and I was so bad at it. I was like, I'm just going to put this racket down. That's not.
Well, I haven't gotten to the point where I'm even willing to play doubles in tennis. I still play singles, so I figure it's part of my natural progression. Probably I'll move to doubles in tennis, and then I'll end up playing pickleball.
You got some pride. When I was young and I used to watch a lot of Sports Center and stuff, I can remember this was back in the mid 90s. I would always watch matches like Pete Sampras and Jim Courier and stuff like that when I was young. And then when I got older, I didn't pay attention. I haven't paid attention to it nearly as much, but I can remember back in the day watching tennis a lot. I thought it was a fun sport to watch. On TV, it's entertaining.
Yeah. Better than watching golf.
Yeah. So you like getting outside. So what kind of stuff do you like to do outside? You building stuff? Are you tinkering? Are you taking stuff apart? Or
a lot of times just working outside. A lot of times just because of where we live, just a lot of great trails to hike. Just a lot of natural beauty around the Austin area to just go see the Highland Lakes and just all the natural parks that are around.
Very cool. So did you move to the Austin, Texas area like when you started working with this company, or had you been there for a while? Or
no, it's when I first started working with this company, I moved down. We had literally gone through our second 7-day power outage living in Connecticut from a snowstorm, and we just said, let's get out of here. This is we weren't meant to live like this. Okay, let's live someplace where they have power at least most of the time. We don't have to drive or shovel snow. So that's when we made the decision to leave the Northeast. We just had enough of the snow and the cold weather.
Were you guys in Texas yet when they had the big winter outage there?
Yes, we were.
They probably blamed it on you, didn't they?
No.
Sure, some friends said, "Hey, what are you guys doing? You guys move here and the power goes out."
There was a lot more made of that than having lived through it like multiple times for
it wasn't
long
a big deal,
periods in
right?
the Northeast. I'm like, this happens all the time elsewhere. It's like, I know you're used to having your own grid and everything's always, always reliable, but it's no different than what happens elsewhere in the U.S.
Power outages from other types of weather are relatively common in Texas too, at least in the Gulf area. I grew up in Houston and Beaumont and stuff. We get hurricanes, you get big storms that last for multiple days.
Yep.
It's knocking the power out, and sometimes it's out for a couple of days. So, but in this case, they're saying, well, it's super cold. It's, people, are without power and they're without heat, they're going to freeze to death. So,
yep.
But very cool. Well, it's glad to hear you're a Texan now. So what's been your experience moving to Texas as far as the Southern hospitality goes? Has everybody accepted you as you're now officially a Texan?
Yeah, I've been here long enough that, I don't quite have the accent, but, I've been here long enough. I'm given sort of honorary status.
Do they call you a Yankee anymore?
Just one or two people who I've known for a long time.
When I was a kid, and I remember telling my friends and family because we moved from the Conroe, Texas area up to the UP of Michigan.
Yeah.
And everybody was just teasing us. Oh, you're going to be a Yankee now. You're going to be a Yankee now. And anytime we went back to visit, oh, here, Yankees coming in. No, but it's in jest. But my experience down there is people just want, they just want good neighbors and they're willing to accept you pretty quick.
Yeah. Well, Austin in particular, there's so many people who have moved in from so many different areas because of all the growth here that, you really have to get outside of the city area to get back to what people would traditionally think of
as Texas,
of what Central Texas is all about.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, my sister and some other families still live down there. They're in Silsbee area, so still kind of Gulf, Texas kind of region, but very, very cool. So tennis, outdoors, anything else? Any kind of travel or anything like that? Or you got kids? Are they grown or?
No, for us, work consumes so much time. We don't really do much travel. I'd like to, but when you're sort of in the startup environment, it's you're spending your evenings doing work. You're spending weekends doing work. It's but our team here, we love what we do. So we're passionate about it, and we think we've got a great technology. We're bringing the market at a great time with the macro trends of renewable energy and electric vehicles that we're pretty focused on what we're doing.
That's exciting. I can't wait to see the things improve, and it's so cool to meet someone like you, Dan, and kind of grassroots level stuff. Like most of the time when you hear about EVs, you're hearing about the cars, and you're seeing the output. You're not hearing about the importance of what's going on under the hoods of those cars. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I remember when I did that test drive years ago of a Tesla Model S, I remember one of the kind of selling points was this car only has 100 moving parts. And I'm like, that blows my mind. There's more than 100 moving parts probably in the door of a typical car, right? It's like, so, and a lot of people I think just think electric cars move by magic.
Well, when you think about an electric vehicle, people would not be surprised that the battery is the most expensive part of the car. Well, the second highest cost of the car are the semiconductors. Yeah. There's so many semiconductors in an electric vehicle. It's actually the second highest cost category in a car.
I remember at the front end of COVID, and they were talking about the chip shortages in cars, and that was causing inventories to go down, and chip shortages and other type of technologies. And part of the things that my business does is, we're doing IT support and we're selling hardware, and there's semiconductors in chips and things. And it piqued my interest. What exactly is this? So I just dug in, watched some old videos about kind of the history of semiconductors and how it moved from older technology to the newer technology. And then I was like, well, where are these things being made? Mm-hmm. Where are they being produced? And they just happen to be produced on the other side of the world. And if shipping goes down, if all these kind of things happen where things start to stop to move in the world, it's going to affect your ability to produce this kind of stuff.
Yep.
So from the standpoint of manufacturing, semiconductors, what does that environment look like as far as kind of broadening the range of where things are built?
Yeah, I mean it's changing. I mean the federal government passed the CHIPS Act that is really designed to stimulate the building of semiconductor fabrication facilities here in the U.S. So we're actually seeing, a lot of the state of the art fabrication facilities that were planned actually being built here instead of being built in places like China or Taiwan. Here in Austin, Samsung's building a $14 billion wafer fabrication facility. So I think
Cool.
People realized how vulnerable our industry and just the economy in general is to some of the supply chain issues. And the government's actually taken a step to really actually create some incentives to actually bring a lot of that back on shore.
This has been great, Dan. It's awesome. It's never a dull moment when I get to meet folks like you to kind of educate me and kind of bring me up to speed on the cool things that are happening. So,
well, thanks. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, awesome. And, one of the things I was thinking about as I was trying to kind of prepare to talk with you was, we've met a couple folks now because we're really trying to do due diligence in this subject matter. And I'm going to try to get, a few folks on from a couple of the other energy sectors. And maybe there's one time we could put together a panel and just get a few of you guys in the same place at the same time to kind of, play pickleball with the subject per se.
It'd be fun. Yeah, that'd be great.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Dan. Appreciate your time.
All right. Thanks, Brian.